Disclaimer, this video is not meant to be an attack on Skullgirls or their development team. This is merely a recap of events that have transpired surrounding the game, along with discussing my opinions and the opinions of others in relation to this game from a mainly objective perspective as a person who has played the game for years, while also being involved in other FGC circles for the better part of a decade. At the end of the day, I am just a cowboy on the internet who has a subjective opinion, and you are also free to share yours. However, do not harass anyone I discuss in my videos, and be a decent human while feeling free to share your thoughts. I would also like to provide a disclaimer and content warning for sexual harassment, race, and socio-political happenings in the US as they relate to this game and are as needed. If these things give you possible triggers, this may be a video to skip. Thanks so much, and let's get into the video.
So I've been around the block, so to speak, of the fighting game community, mainly in the online world. Going through the different fan bases and their controversies, it's possible to say that the FGC would be a relatively tame yet competitive scene to harbor your skills in and maybe make some friends along the way. Depending on this game, this can be the exact experience you have. Others may pave the way for a different experience that could lead into a degree of being toxic. But never have I ever seen the vitriol and the awful nature of a fan base like I've seen with the fans of a very specific game in the FGC. It's a game built by its fans more than any other. It was crowdfunded, propped up, given interest and expansion, but now the same fans that were ready to build the game up are finally ready to tear the game down by force. This rise and fall belongs to the timeline of one of the trailblazers of the indie fighting game scene. So today, I'm hopefully going to be able to properly take you through the rise, fall, and nightmare of Skullgirls. To start out this entire saga, we actually need to go all the way back to the late 2000s. We specifically need to look into the lives of two men, being Alex Ahad and Mike Zymont. These two are the creators of Skullgirls, and we'll be addressing Mike Z specifically not too long from now. We have to look at the game's inception first. Alex Ahad made Skullgirls as a side project back in the early days of the 2000s, and had a few people help him along the way with tasks like programming and music. They would lay the groundwork for an early rendition of Skullgirls, which looked more along the lines of the likes of Street Fighter 3, BlazBlue, and more pixelated fighting games of the 2000s. However, in 2008, these two would set to work on a new version of Skullgirls, which would run off the Z engine, made by Mike Z. We also would need to put a pin in the Z engine, as there's another game that intersects with our story later down the line that uses this engine. In 2012, the final initial version of Skullgirls running on the Z engine would be published by Konami and Reverge Labs. It was released with 8 characters, being Valentine, Philia, Sarabella, Peacock, Painwheel, Misfortune, Double, and Parasol. According to multiple game reviewers like IGN, the game was a success, but a microcosm of success in the FGC. The FGC standards are high, and their hunger for new content is even higher, which is a major issue with fighting games right now. We will also have to put a pin in that. However, knowing how cursed Skullgirls is, neither of the two companies that initially helped out Alex and Mike would see through the project for very long. We'll begin with Konami, since their fallout is very drastic and caused a lot of harm to the game upon inception. Konami would be responsible for the cause of the initial first issue for Skullgirls, and it dates back pretty far, being 2012. Autumn Games, which funded Reverge Labs, was hit with a lawsuit over another game of theirs, being Def Jam Rapstar. EMI Records would sue for copyright issues, and then Konami and Autumn Games stopped funding Reverge Labs in order to deal with a long-ass legal battle that would ensue. Because of this, the entire Skullgirls team was laid off from the company and would have to seek a new home, and the new home they found would be found with each other. 10 employees would end up staying along for the ride of their lives with the formation of Lab Zero Games, with both Alex and Mike still in it, along with 8 other employees originally laid off by Reverge. Then issue 2 came to fruition. Lab Zero had no money. All of their funding from the 3 dev studios that were all tied in a legal battle, or in Reverge's case, went defunct. So using the community they've built, we would see a crowdfunding campaign emerge from Skullgirls to help Lab Zero continue their development of Skullgirls in February 2013. They would raise $828,000, which is monumental. Adjusted for inflation, that equals $1,092,960. That is insane. How did that number even happen, though? Well, for that context, we need to look at EVO 2013. EVO has been the long-standing competition series for all fighting games and their fan bases to congregate at, to fight for prize money and speculate for fun. One final slot at the EVO Grand Stage was going to be reserved for the fighting game that could raise the most money for charity. Skullgirls would take on this task and would come in with around $78,000, which adjusted for inflation totals over 6 figures. The problem is, Skullgirls would actually come in second, and that has to do with Smash Bros. Smash Melee was actually given the final spot because the game raised $94,000 due to multiple big donors coming through at the last minute. Because of this, EVO would create the indie fighting game series, with Skullgirls headlining its first year. With all these eyes on Skullgirls, the game's Indiegogo would soar through multiple goals, including adding 5 characters to the game, being Squiggly, Beowulf, Eliza, Big Band, and Robo Fortune. And Fukawa is a little bit of an anomaly in the roster because Fukawa was initially an April Fool's joke that became a fully fleshed out character later on, but she was added to the game around the same time. Then, after the completed development of the final characters, Lab Zero would then go on to make their next project, Indivisible. Here, right here, this is where Skullgirls should have been given a sequel and not attempt to revive the game itself. And we'll quickly see what happens when they jump the shark on this franchise and how the initial game overstayed its welcome. However, in order to explain that, we have to talk about a rather dark subject in the case of Skullgirls history, and that incident would throw Lab Zero overboard. In 2020, cosplayer and FGC member Bunny Ayu revealed the DMs exchanged between herself and Mike Z. Upon revealing these, Mike's disgusting behavior towards women was on full display to the entire FGC. His sexist and racist remarks would also come to light over the coming days, with Mr. Beazle and Carbon Bay also corroborating stories with Bunny to add to the mounting evidence against Mike Z. Big players like Sonic Fox would also turn their backs on him after everything came to light, especially after when commentating. Mike Z would make a gross comment in 2020 saying, "I can't breathe" on a commentary panel, referencing George Floyd's last words after he was murdered, and it kickstarted a revitalization of the Black Lives Matter movement. Sonic Fox initially defended the comment, but would have a change of heart and back up the community on their statement saying, "I've said before I can forgive a mistake, not a habit. It turns out this was a habit." And that was the sentiment for many people. After this, Da Purple Sharpie would get together with multiple other tournament organizers to ban Mike Z from them for a span of 2 years minimum. Mariel Kuniko Cartwright was one of the 10 employees that went on to form Lab Zero. It said she tolerated years of harassment that she was then blamed for by Mike Z because of her appearance. Personally, this shit makes my blood boil. The community took every action they could, and I'm happy they did so. Mike Z does not deserve a platform, and he has a new game coming out being Diesel Legacy. Don't support it. He does not deserve a place in this community, and no one who conducts the same behavior as him should be given that opportunity either. With all of this presented, the rest of the Skullgirls crew would resign one by one, eventually leaving Mike Z to have no choice other than to let Lab Zero go defunct. Hidden Variable, who made the mobile version of Skullgirls, and Autumn Games, who was still working with Skullgirls at the time, released statements denouncing Mike Z and Lab Zero as a whole. Indivisible would have a shorter runtime, and Skullgirls would be left in a confusing state of existence. With Beowulf having been released back in 2015 and no new characters set to release at the time, what would come of the game that was backed so heavily by its loyal audience, given chance after chance but taking hit after hit? Enter Annie, the Stargirl. Annie would be announced as the first Season 1 DLC character for the repackaged version of Skullgirls, being Skullgirls' second encore, which dropped back in 2015. The repackage of the first game was a necessary repackage since Konami was giving Skullgirls a multitude of publishing problems back in 2013, all relating to publishing Skullgirls after the developer switch. So now we have the second encore version. The version has persisted up until now, but we haven't had paid DLC in the history of the game yet until the 2020s. Annie would be the first paid DLC character in the game that we would get, and she was steeply priced as well, being available for $10. We'll discuss the pricing shenanigans later though, they get much worse. Annie is commonly regarded to be the breath of fresh air that Skullgirls desperately needed back in 2021. Sporting an attire that has a mix of a pirate's outfit and a Sailor Moon magical girl inspired imagery, Annie has one of the most monumental releases for a fighting game character in a while. She was desperately needed for the game, and Annie is still pretty well respected as both a character concept and character within the context of a fighting game. However, this is when the shark was jumped. This should have been the start to a sequel of Skullgirls. Starting over after no characters for 5 years would have been the best option. However, with how strong Skullgirls' competitive scene was, it did make sense to add to the original game, so it kinda just depends who you ask. Using the Z engine to craft a new Skullgirls would have been optimal, and time would truly tell this after each new character release and delay. For now though, Annie was enough to keep the game moving in a better direction after it went wildly off the rails. Once we hit Umbrella, the fandom is still running high, and the cracks are showing though, which Black Dahlia would bring to the forefront in 2023. Umbrella was an important character for Skullgirls lore, but now she became a playable character in 2022. Hold on, can we pull up a roadmap? Yep, Umbrella was supposed to be out much earlier than she was. Originally planned for a late 2021 release, we wouldn't see her actually drop until April of 2022, which is just like a little bit concerning, don't you think? Umbrella was a cute, innocent fighter ready to throw down in her posh Paddington-inspired outfit, which many found rather endearing. However, once we get to the teaser for Black Dahlia, the whole roof was ready to blow off of the Skullgirls fandom. Black Dahlia was a top 4 DLC fan vote back in the day when the Indiegogo campaign happened, and I think her hype was built up so high that the delays that happened with her became a detriment to the game's reputation. Black Dahlia would go even longer in her state of development hell, being stuck for almost a year after the release of Umbrella, not releasing until late March of 2023. And Marie is more than likely going to pass up Dahlia, and if she does, I will be very concerned, more so than I am now. Marie is currently in development, and is by far one of the most hyped up characters for Skullgirls, being the actual Skullgirl herself. Hypothetically, she probably should have been out already, but we're still having sketches be shown right now for her, and that's not good. That's why I think her estimated release is early to mid 2024. It's not great. 4 years for one-sided DLC when every other game on the market is currently passing it is abysmal. Sure, you can look at Mortal Kombat 1, Tekken, and Street Fighter's DLC releases and say that they are just bigger companies, and that's absolutely true. But let's go in for a one-on-one comparison that I think dismantles the development of Skullgirls to such a degree that it's a little bit embarrassing. And the game in question is a horse fighting game. No, I'm not kidding. Them's Fightin' Herds is another game with a rather cursed history. The game went in and out of development hell for years, initially starting off as a My Little Pony fan game titled My Little Pony Fighting is Magic. In fact, the original roster that we've seen on release for the game, the 6 original characters we see now still take a lot of inspiration from their foreigner counterparts. Then, 2 main entities would come to the aid of the game that was seemingly doomed after Hasbro struck down the initial characters. Someone else, being the creative director of MLP at the time, Lauren Faust, provided the main 6 development team with a whole cast of characters to work with. And the second would be Lab Zero, who gave the Z engine, which Skullgirls ran off of, to Main 6. This is huge because the Z engine is a privately owned engine that has only ever been used for one other game, being Skullgirls itself. Them's Fightin' Herds is the only other game to have ever run on the same engine. This is about as close of a one-to-one comparison as anyone could get compared to how bad Skullgirls DLC truly is. Dropping with 6 characters, which then became 7 prior to console release, being Arizona, Velvet, Palm, Paprika, Oleander, Tianhuo, and later Shanty, the game had a differentiated cast of amazing characters, much like Skullgirls did, and both are very good with their base rosters. However, the game would actually take a different approach to Skullgirls with its publishing. After nailing down the characters, a story mode that was interactive, having move list combos, professional players assist with meta, and more, the game would release to consoles in late 2022, and finally be in a fully releasable state for every console at the time, including Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, and Mac. Then they would begin to roll out their DLC in time for 2023 to begin, already having 1 character under their belt. The DLC would prove how much better Skullgirls could have been with their DLC. We would get our first DLC character, Texas, in December of 2022. Then Stronghoof would join in April of 2023. Nidra, the next character, was revealed shortly after and is aiming towards a release of September or October 2023. Then the final character would be in late 2023 or early 2024. It's a little hard to say.
Hello, editing Catboy. It is 11 p.m. right now, but I would feel a little bit silly not including this. Main 6 actually released a statement about Nidra that's going to affect some of what I present in this video, and that is that Nidra is actually going to be coming in January or February, most likely, of next year. So using that logic, just imagine anytime I bring up Nidra's release date, I'm saying January to February 2024 instead of September to October. This was very recent and was done after the part 1 recording was finished, so I had to come in here and add it afterwards. And also I'm very happy that they're adding a balancing patch. It was getting really annoying fighting Texas and having him kill me in 2 hits. Thanks, Main 6. Back to the video.
This is a lot better than Skullgirls taking over 3 years. Them's Fightin' Herds cut that time in half to make the same amount of characters with a similarly sized team, running on the same engine and running in the same competitive scene for years. Remember the charity drive that Skullgirls almost won but was beaten out by Smash? Fighting is Magic, which was the predecessor to Them's Fightin' Herds, was on that list. We'll use the character reveals the first benchmark for the time frame required to go off of. Annie's reveal would be in January 2021, when she was added to the mobile version of Skullgirls prior to that, which we are not counting satisfying as her release because of the fact that she was not in the main version of the game. It would also look a lot worse. She wouldn't be released until July 2021, 6 months later. Texas was revealed in August 2022 and wouldn't be released until 4 months later. Them's Fightin' Herds is currently winning. Umbrella released in 2022, so we have 16 months for 2 characters for Skullgirls. Stronghoof would release in April of 2023, so we had 4 months for Them's Fightin' Herds. We already see Them's Fightin' Herds being a mile ahead. If Nidra releases in October 2023, then we had 6 months to Them's Fightin' Herds. That's 14 months for 3 characters. Skullgirls would release Black Dahlia in March of 2023, being 11 months later than Umbrella. So with just 3 characters, Them's Fightin' Herds averages 4.6 months per character, and Skullgirls averages 9 months per character, and I can guarantee that Marie will probably make that worse. While the final characters for Them's Fightin' Herds will be consistent or slightly longer. Them's Fightin' Herds has disproved every problem with Skullgirls by not only halving their time for DLC, but also knocking down their DLC cost by almost half as well. $20 for 4 characters and 2 Skullgirls characters would already be the same price as that. That is wild. Main 6 did everything right that Skullgirls has yet to finally kick into gear. The other issue that the game solves is definitely one of its fan relations. Main 6 largely stays out of reach from its fans, keeping consistent with low engagement from fans, which is something that Skullgirls hasn't always quite grasped, and their latest controversy only served to make that an even bigger problem that almost did Skullgirls in for good.